start recording. I want to thank, we've got a really nice crowd in today. I want to thank everybody for joining. I want to especially thank Mark Groen, Jim and Peg Hill, Hannah Knight, Michelle Lorimer, Michael Carp, Robert Clobes, James Martin, and all the students who are joining us today. I'm going to also deputize Peg Hill there. She's on a different window. And if anybody drops in who is a faculty and they'd like to share their thoughts, please draw my attention to that. At any point, everybody should be able to raise your hand, type in the chat. Hopefully we'll have a smooth session. We've got a little bit over an hour, and this is the Future History Teachers Information Panel. I don't know how many this is. I think that maybe this is about 7 or 8 that we've been doing. So some of you guys make sure you'll punch your cards and get a free sandwich. Mark and Jim and Alex and everybody. Hannah, you guys have been to a lot of these ones, really sharing some wonderful information, especially in these crazy days, and adding to the warm community and the really supportive community of the Cal State San Bernardino History Department. So it gives me absolute pleasure. It's really a great pleasure. This is indeed, honestly, one of the highlights of my semester now that we've made this sort of an every semester kind of a routine, to see the crew, to get the band back together. It's always a real delight, and we got some new. We got Robert joining us newly now, and James and some others. Let me just turn it over. Can we start, Mark? Can I ask you to lead us off, and then Jim and Peg Hill, and then Hannah, Michael and Michelle. You don't have to go in this order, and then Robert and James. That's just the order you're appearing on my screen. But Mark and then Jim, if you guys want to get started.
Okay. Good morning. It's wonderful to be here and see all of you again, especially some of my former students who are now extremely successful educators. For those of you who are history students, I went through the history program at Cal State Northridge, and then I went through the teacher ed program at Cal State San Bernardino. Thankfully, they did not remember me when I applied for a job in the Department of Education at Cal State San Bernardino, but I look forward to seeing many of you in the program. Thank you.
I'm Jim. Whoa. Whoa. Okay, wait a minute. Let's see here. Does that work now? No.
It looks like Jim is muted, and he apparently is actually on a submarine, not at Pompeii. So maybe until he gets that taken care of, we can move to the next person.
I can go ahead. And Jim and Margaret, I had that happen on a Zoom meeting a couple weeks ago, and I think if you're in the same house and one of you has to be muted while the other's talking, if they're both on, that's where that feedback can come from. So that might have been what happened.
And I think the speaker's off. Sorry, Michael, quick. The speakers on one of the 2 devices has to be off as well, not just muted. But
okay, thanks,
one
Jeremy.
Of the 2 speakers have to, yeah.
I'm very excited to have so many of you here. So welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Michael Carp. I just joined Cal State this year in the history department. And I have experience. I was a substitute teacher for a few years, taught high school, taught at an early college, community colleges, I taught middle school. So kind of been around the block, been in a bunch of different teaching positions, and look forward to hearing from all the other panelists and answering questions towards the end. Thanks.
I don't know, maybe I'm next. My name is Robert Clobes. If you're new, I mentioned earlier, I'm a principal at Ruth Musser Middle School, which is grades 5 through 8 in Rancho Cucamonga. I did get I got my undergrad, my master's, admin credential, teaching credential, everything at Cal State San Bernardino. So I'm a huge fan, especially of the history department. And Professor Murray invited me through Dr. Pytel, which was, he was an amazing mentor to me as I went through the history department. So I feel honored to be here and look forward to answering any questions that any of you might have, especially getting into middle school and what that might look like as a history teacher, because it is a complicated day and age we live right now. So maybe some strategies for you I could give you.
I can go next. Good morning. I'm Hannah Knight. I currently teach at Rialto High School, and I've been there for probably the last 5 or 6 years. And I did my undergrad, I did my teaching credential, and currently doing my master's at Cal State San Bernardino as well.
I can go next if that's okay. So my name is Alex Ponce. I am also a grad from Cal State San Bernardino. I did my undergrad there and graduated in 2013. I did the credential program at UCR. I'm currently teaching at Riverside STEM Academy. It's a small magnet school in Riverside, California, right behind UCR. And I've been teaching history there along with econ and government, all the social studies classes for the last 7-8 years. And yeah, I'm just doing this for a long time as well too. The whole last year we've been doing everything virtual. Happy to be here for like the 7th, 8th time, I think, right? Dr. Murray was like so many times. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, get your frequent flyer miles. And Michelle.
Yeah, I can go next. Hi, I'm Michelle Lorimer. I've been teaching at Cal State San Bernardino in the history department for like 8 years now. I teach the teaching history methods course for the last few terms. And so many of you on here know me as I forced you to attend this today. And I have been working a lot with some of the organizations that implement the framework, the new history social science framework, and other projects doing some teacher development and curriculum work. So I'm happy to see you all.
I can go next. Good morning, everyone. My name is James Martin. I am currently a student teacher at Vista Heights Middle School in Moreno Valley. And for a lot of you, student teaching will probably be your next step after you finish your bachelor's. But I finished my degree last year, spring 2020 from Cal State. And I'm currently completing my master's and my teaching credential at UC Riverside. And I am teaching right now 8th grade United States history.
Peg and Jim, should we got a quick introduction for Jim in the chat, but if the speakers are off for one of you each, I think we should be able to go ahead. Peg, you are, yes, you are deputized, so you should be able to unmute.
Okay. I'm Peg Hill, and I've been in education forever. Spent 18 years in the Chaffey District, much of it at Ontario High School as a history social science person, and we brought in all kinds of ideas working with kids that are have a little less experience in the world than some other places, and started a program that actually was very like AVID. And it was called Ontario College Bound, and I ran that program for a number of years, and then I went to the district office, and then went to San Bernardino County as the history social science coordinator for the region. They didn't have anybody in the entire region, that Region 9, which is Riverside, San Bernardino, Inyo, and Mono counties. So that was kind of a fairly large area to cover, but I ended up doing the things that Michelle was talking about, and working with the history projects, working with all kinds of projects with the idea of providing support for teachers. And I'm still doing that. And so when I get a chance to talk, really, I will tell you about some of those and hope that we can convince you to be part of that.
Thanks, Peg. Jim, do you want to quickly go over your self-introduction there? Should be able to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm back now. I'm on the iPad in a different room. So my experience more was teaching at 3 regional high schools and also being an administrator for some years, and then teaching in the Ed Admin credential program full-time at Cal State San Bernardino for 10 years. So my experience was more focused on how administrators generally will view applicants and interview processes and things applicants need to be alert to and aware of when they start applying for jobs.
Thanks. So as is obvious here, we have a really, really wonderful wealth of sort of embarrassment of riches on this panel. It's such a fantastic group to join the group. I mean to share with you all. Oh, good. And a note from Michelle, starting possibly with Mark again, if I can put you on the spot. And then I think everybody has maybe a minute. Everybody on the panel has a minute or 2 or 3 maybe to give a little bit of an update on what you've done in the past. And Robert is new to this, but something in addressing the question of what I wish I'd known when I was in your shoes as undergrads who are excited about teaching. How would I have saved myself an enormous amount of blood, sweat, and tears in this process? What I really wish I'd known about the process of the work that's involved in becoming a teacher, working as a teacher. So some of this stuff that you're going to hear today maybe is a few years out, right? So the work that Robert and Alexander and Hannah are doing is sort of a few years out. But you'll also hear a little bit about, and this is what we're going to get first from Mark, a little bit about our credential program here at Cal State San Bernardino. And we can hear a little bit more about some other programs because some of our panelists went through other programs. Hannah is in our inaugural MA in History class. We have an inaugural class, a Master of History that just started, and it's a real delight to work with these guys. It's a terrific cohort, and we're going to be, of course, continuing that in the new year, accepting applications now. And Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a little bit of the rundown because Professor Lorimer noted that, and thanks, Michelle, for bringing your students. Michelle noted that some of her students are especially interested in the kind of details, what's involved in getting your credentials. What do you need to do? For my part, I'll note right away that the CSET waiver is not yet technically in place. It is under review. We are hoping to have a CSET waiver maybe by September. So that is not in place right now. If some magic happens, it may happen before. But in the meantime, as far as I know, you're going to have to take that CSET, CBEST as you would. I'm going to turn over to Mark because once again, to those acronyms, I am very much at sea, and this is the water that Mark swims in. So thank you, Professor Groen, for joining us. I'll turn it over to you for a quick rundown on the credentials.
Thank you. My first recommendation to all of you history majors would be take the CBEST and CSET tests during your senior year. Once you have those in place, There is nothing to stop you from getting a credential, basically. But you will need, until they get the CSET waiver, you will need the CSETs. And for most programs, you will need them in place prior to entry to the program. That is certainly true of our program. Even if it's not true of another program that you go into, I would certainly recommend having it when you go in, because that is one thing that can stop you from getting a credential. So I recommend taking those tests during your senior year when it's really fresh in your mind and you're really good to go. And then if you need to retake one section, you've got plenty of time to do it. So that would be my very first recommendation. And the San Bernardino Teacher Ed program has two tracks. It has an A track and a B track. The A track is accelerated 1 year in and out. And that track now offers a master's after one more semester. Okay, now don't tell them I told you this, because I'm the coordinator of the Ed Master's program. But if you are a history major and you are planning on being a history teacher, I strongly recommend that you get your master's in your content area, not in education. And the reason I say that is because there is going to be a student in your class where some aspect of history lights their candle. When I was in teaching high school, it was one solid B student until we got to ancient China. I had a master's in history. He knew far more about ancient China than I did. So he was an independent study for that unit, and then went right back to being a very solid B student. But that's why I recommend the master's in your history content, or econ, or whatever your specialty is. Those of you who are just starting out, if you are not in the A track, I would suggest switching to the A track, because that is excellent preparation for the entire teacher program.
Real quick, Mark, sorry to interrupt. We're calling that the pre-credential track. So they lost their letters, but what was teaching track, or track A, is now called the pre-credential track.
So that's the one to look for. That one is excellent preparation, and those people come in extremely well prepared. So that is what I would suggest as you go into and apply for the teacher ed program, whether it's Cal State or any other. Other things you want me to mention, Jeremy or Michelle?
Do the students need the CSET to get into the program now? Because I know when COVID, during the beginning of COVID, that was kind of waived. Is that going to be in place for this, for September or August?
An excellent question. It is currently in place for the students now in the program. I do not expect it to remain in place for fall and next year. And the reason is we're finding people are having problem passing during the program. Trying to do a program, student teaching, and CSETs all at the same time seems to be a little bit too much. I would strongly urge all of you to take it during your senior year. It seems to be much easier to pass during your senior year than during the program for some reason. And it might just be lower stress level and so on. But absolutely go ahead and take it during your senior year if you can. And I see a couple of hands raised. Katie and Haley?
I'll go ahead and unmute. Katie, you should be able to unmute now.
I had a question in regards to like the tracks. So how do you know what track you're going into when you sign up for the credential program?
You tell us. If you want the accelerated 1 year track and you're ready to go, you tell us you want a track, and that's where we put you.
Okay.
It's actually our preferred track, although those of you who are not able to use the accelerated, we do have a slower 3-semester track.
Okay, thank you.
Haley, you should be able to unmute now.
Hi, I am a sophomore and I'm already on the pre-credential track. What would the path look like for me when it comes to CBEST and CSET and getting into the program?
Excellent question. CBEST will still be required. It's the state proficiency. It's actually an 8th grade proficiency, so don't worry too much about that one. That one you should be able to pass with no problem. The CSET, since you're now in the pre-credential track and they are applying for the CSET waiver, by the time you get there, they should have the CSET waiver in place, in which case all you need is that noted on your transcript and you are good. You can go straight into the program and no CSET. But that's in the future. Don't plan on that for this fall. And did I answer all of your questions, Haley?
A
There's
question
one more.
from, oh,
Haley has one more question.
Yeah. So because I'm already on the pre-credential track, when would you recommend me taking the CBEST?
Maybe your junior or senior year.
Like towards the end of my junior year?
Or you can take it now.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead and sign. For CBEST, I would just go ahead and sign up.
All right.
And if there's anybody that wants to give a rebuttal, that's fine. I'm open to those. I was trained as a historian. It's what we do.
Is there any way I can prepare for the CBEST? Like any books you recommend?
There are a few online preparation things that you can get that are pretty much free. There are ways to look through what's on that test. It's basically a math and writing.
Okay.
Basic writing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And there was another hand somewhere.
I was wondering if I could interject a really quick recommendation.
certainly.
Is that okay?
Alex?
Oh, yeah, sure. So Haley, if you are at all interested in substitute teaching, from my understanding, all you need is to pass a CBEST, and if you can apply at any district that you want to start subbing right now, it's highly recommended so that you can kind of get a feel of what the classroom is like before you get into even your teaching credential. So yeah, the sooner you take the CBEST, sooner you can actually start subbing, and it's a great way to like immerse yourself right into the culture for sure. So just as a thought, yeah.
Excellent idea, Alex. Thank you. Yes.
And Andrew had his hand raised.
Okay, yes, I had a question for you. So I know I've been to a bunch of these, but I just wanted to clarify. Once you take the CBEST and CSET, then you apply to something else to start teaching, then you apply to your teaching credential at another university or at Cal State. Is that what I understand?
That's correct.
Okay, so then once I do that, then I would apply to a university, and that's a few semesters, but that's also when I would start student teaching and getting the credential for California after.
That's correct. You do your student teaching in the program.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
But you are welcome to start substitute teaching before that, as Mr. Ponce pointed out. And I'm sure he'd be happy to help you into his district.
And then,
Absolutely, we could always use help, yeah.
and then also for Dr. Murray, do you want me to can I do my thing on the history club now, or do you want me to wait until later in the program?
thanks, Andrew. Yes, please, let's pause for station identification here. Andrew's going to tell us a little bit about the history club.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that, guys. Well, my name is Andrew Hunter. I am part of the Cal State San Bernardino History Program, History Club. It is a great club. I highly recommend it for any history majors that would be interested in. Also, we have Phi Alpha Theta, which is a great program also that you can apply to. It's a brand of the History Club, and it's very exciting and very cool. And also, new development is I have just been named the first president of the Palm Desert, the Cal State San Bernardino Palm Desert Campus History Club. So I'll be heading that. So I'm very excited about doing that and helping those students or whatever, helping those students out so we can build that part of the Palm Desert Campus History Department along with Dr. Karp. So I'm very excited about that. So I highly encourage it. We have meetings every other Thursday, and we had a meeting last Thursday, if I remember correctly. So our next meeting will not be this Thursday, but the following Thursday. And if you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. And I would highly recommend you just coming. We're a very good group of kids. We do a lot of fun stuff, whatever we do. We have guest speakers that come in. We plan cool history related events and stuff. So if you have any questions or if you just want to come and hang out with a great group of history students. Even if you're not a history major, I highly encourage you. Our next meeting will be next Thursday. And thank you very much, Dr. Murray.
Thanks for that, Andrew. Thanks for the reminder. And Professor Karp, Michael Carp, is one of our faculty advisors of the History Club right now. So you can reach out to Andrew or to Professor Karp to learn more, and maybe you guys can post email addresses in the chat if anybody wants to get in touch with you. We had a couple questions, but did anybody else want to jump on any of these points before we move to David and then Ashley? All right, I'm going to ask David to. We haven't really gone around the horn with sort of everybody's two minute, sort of 1 minute or 2 minute, what I wish I'd known kind of a thing. But let's go do David and then Ashley's questions, and then maybe go back around the horn because you guys did such quick introductions, and I know there's troves of wisdom to be shared. So I'll ask David to unmute. Go ahead and ask your question, David, and then Ashley.
Thank you, Professor Murray. I'll make it brief. So, Mr. Ponce, you said that there was you had to just pass the CSET or CBEST. Is that in combination with the bachelor's?
No, technically, probably Dr. Groen could help more with this one entirely, but from my understanding is all you need to just pass the CBEST. You don't even have to have your bachelor's yet. You just have to pass that and you can apply to any district to become a sub, unless something has changed drastically in the last year or so. Can anyone else who is an admin help me with that part?
I wish I could add to that. I think you're accurate. But you know what? I'm not 100% sure. I usually just get a list of people and HR deals with it. I wish I could help more, but I think that sounds right to me.
Okay, just want to make sure because sorry.
No, I'm sorry, Alex. I think you actually do have to have your bachelor's before you can do the district. So you get your bachelor's and then you and passing the CBEST before you can actually apply to become a substitute teacher. I mean, that's what Rialto Unified District has in place.
Okay.
My understanding is the same as Hannah's.
Yeah, when I was a sub, that was the case, that I think it's after you have your bachelor's and the CSET, or the CBEST, excuse me, that's when you can join those sub pools. But I would still kind of reiterate, if you want to get the CBEST done now, go for it. Kind of to just reiterate what Mark was saying, that the more of those things you can kind of check off as you go, the better. But yeah, I think you have to have your bachelor's and the CBEST before you can sub.
Thank you, everybody, for clarifying. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get a question from Ashley, and then if our group doesn't mind, and thanks to Professor Jones, Department Chair, for joining us today as well. This is an excellent brain trust, and I want to make sure. One more quick question from Ashley, and then I do want to go around the horn if anybody wants to share your quick what I wish I'd known wisdom with the group. Ashley, can you go ahead?
Hi, so I'm trying to apply for the senior track for the teacher's credential program, and I was curious if the requirements are the same because of COVID. I know that I tried getting a TB test through the hospital, but I guess they're not doing it right now. So I was wondering if that's still a requirement for the senior track application.
I think it is, but that would be a question I would refer you to the program coordinator, Dr. Becky Sumbera. She can, if you email me, I can forward it to her and we can find out the actual real things as of now for you, because the requirements keep changing. And that's part of the problem. As we go back to face-to-face, the requirements are changing again. What was happening during COVID is phasing out now as districts are now going back face-to-face.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Can I just say, Ashley, you can get TB tests through the Student Health Center too. So I know that they're doing some telemedicine, but our student health center should be starting to take appointments as well. So you can get it done there.
All right, I want to make sure that we make the most of our gathered our assembly here today. So the order that I have now, because Mark gave us some good rundown, and I'm sure we'll come back to Mark again on the process. But Hannah, and then Michael, and then Alexander is the order that I see now in terms of the next up on deck, you know, before they go to the commercial break in baseball. Hannah, Michael, Alexander, and then Michelle and Robert. But Hannah, do you want to lead us off with a little bit of your thoughts in terms of what you wish you'd known?
Sure. So one of the pieces of advice that was something I learned is how important your cohort is. And it's the one in the credential program, and it's also the one in your department too. I mean, that can make or break your experience as you go through the teaching credential. It can also make or break your experience in your first year as a teacher, is working with your coworkers. That's a lot of aid, that's a lot of support. And I saw this question in the chat, and it was from Katie Ray about the teaching online. So I do teach online, and getting accustomed with technology is probably something that is something when we went through the program, and Alex can kind of add to this, but we did not have to face the same struggles, but it's something that you've kind of had to learn on the fly. So as you guys are going through the program, learning that technology can definitely make your entrance as a substitute teacher a lot easier, because you do need to have a good understanding with it all. But those are probably the two things that I think are really vital to really kind of understand going through this program.
Thanks, Hannah. And I think Jim and Peg was going to mention something like this as well, but we'll circle back. Michael, and then Alexander, and then Michelle.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of emphasize too, go back to the substitute teaching thing. When I was writing my dissertation, I did it for a substitute teacher for a couple of years, and it definitely is a great way. If you have some time, you know, between the credential program and when you graduate, or if it's something you kind of want to check out, it definitely helps you get a feel for what teaching is like, especially because you're going into different classrooms every day with different students and different teachers. So there's like a new dynamic. So you get really kind of a feel of a wide variety of what teaching high school and middle school can be like very quickly. It's also kind of, I think, a crash course in classroom management that you kind of have to adapt very quickly to rein in a group of 30 plus teenagers. So it's helpful in that way, I would say. So I definitely recommend it. It's also really good for networking, that you get to know the people working at the schools, maybe even in the district or the area you might want to work, and you get to know folks. So you can start to build some connections that way too, which is really important. As far as things that I wish I would have known, or things that I learned along the way, being in the K-12 education kind of system, one, I would kind of emphasize the importance to be open to teaching places and teaching things that maybe the subjects that you maybe weren't kind of anticipating or thinking about. So, you know, as is in the case in history, you've probably heard that jobs are harder to come by than they are in the sciences and other fields. So if you're able and willing to kind of have a wide net and apply all over the place, that'll definitely increase your chances of landing a job, or landing a job that you're excited about. And the first job I got teaching at a graduate school was in Baltimore, so I moved to the other side of the country. And it was great. It was a fantastic experience. So keep that in mind. And then when I came back to California, I ended up teaching middle school, which was something that after I'd been substitute teaching in a sub middle school, I thought to myself, I will never do that. And ended up really actually liking teaching middle school a lot, even though it was something that I thought I didn't ever want to do. It was terrific. So definitely try to keep an open mind. Try to be as flexible as you can. And also too, with the middle school job, I ended up teaching language arts, which was something that I never knew I was going to be doing either. So keeping kind of your options open, I think, is really helpful. Another thing that kind of continually came up for me along the way is every time I started a new teaching job, I felt like I had no idea what I was doing, and that I was totally unqualified for the position. And I think that one of the things I learned along the way, and I think that this kind of echoes what Hannah was saying, is that there's always going to be people along the way that you learn from, that help you out, that teach you classroom management skills, that give you tips and pointers. And it's your colleagues along the way that can really go a long way at helping you, kind of learn the ropes, and become a better teacher year in and year out, which is one of the great things about being an educator at any level, is that we're continually learning and trying to continually get better at what we do. And that's true when you start out, and I think it's true for all of your career. So just look for those folks that can help you along the way, whether it's faculty, whether it's colleagues, whether it's friends, and it really goes a long way. I think that's all I can think of for now. Thanks, everybody.
That's a lot. Thanks, Michael. And at a certain point, I'm gonna have Michael is gonna take over this situation, because he's so much better positioned, so much more experienced in putting. I'll stand by and I'll send the repetitive emails. But Michael has such a breadth of experience here, that it's I really appreciate your time. Thanks, Michael. Alexander, Michelle, and then Robert, the next three. Does that sound good?
It sounds good. Thank you. So I can't agree more with both Hannah and Michael about everything they said, including the parts about building relationships with other people to help you learn, learning the technology, being open to everything that you're going to be learning as you go along, and constantly being able to adjust. I couldn't agree more with all that stuff. Normally, when I get to this part to talk about things that I wish I'd known, I kind of have a whole list, but I kind of condense it down to one sticky note. I used to have like a whole notebook full of things, but I got just a couple of talking points that I'll be using to talk about the things that I wish I would have known first year. So one thing I always come back to is that your first year is not just about survival. It really is about building relationships with other teachers, if you are lucky enough to have a whole department or, a team that you work with. But I would argue maybe even more importantly to build relationships with students that, you're going to be probably seeing some of them often, as is my case. I am in a pretty unique situation. I teach at a very small school where I teach all the grades from 10 through 12, all the subjects. And, I see the kids for 3 or 4 years sometimes, and I'm building that trust with them year after year. And so building relationships with students is an important part of your first year, because it teaches you how to empathize. It teaches you to kind of remember, like, to put yourself back in their shoes, and that you were once a student in their place as well too. What would you have liked your teacher to have been when you were in time? It's a constant question I come back to. What do I wish my teacher would have told me when I was in those shoes? And how could I have been better? How could I be better than that, so that I can continue improving for my own students, right? And the second thing that I found out that is really important, especially early on, is trust, especially with your classes and with those that you are teaching. You can't teach content until they trust you. Nothing that will go into their ears will ever stick unless they can actually feel like you're actually with them, and that what's going on, or that they can basically just feel you out, that they can sense that you care, and that you are not just a talking head up there, or a sage on the stage. You got to be a person among the people to some degree, and you have to be able to establish some kind of trust with them, because that's the foundation for respect, for learning. It sets the tone for the kind of relationship you want to build with them altogether. Trust is important, is what I'm saying. The third thing is, and this is really important, I think, as well as we're, getting to your years, I loved history because of the content. I mean, I fell in love with history, not just, because I went to a great school that had a great department for it too. I constantly go back to how much I love the history department at Cal San Bernardino. And I loved history before that. But the most important thing that I tell my students is that we're trying to build skills here on top of our content. Content is important, but skills are very much more important than that. How to properly analyze things that you're looking at and communicate it in writing and in speaking, right? Fourth thing, if you get a chance to, get involved with your school's leadership and anything that's a school initiative. So right now, one of the things that we are doing at RUSD is trying to do more anti-racist education and implicit bias training. So if you are passionate about those things and you want to learn more about that and want to be as part of the charge, I highly recommend that you find a way to get involved in your school's leadership. Right now, I'm currently at my high school's leadership team. Me and 3 other teachers, we work to help the administration figure out how we want to do our schedules for next year, if there's anything we want to focus on thematically. And it's been a really great experience for me because it gives me a dimension to work with that is more administrative, but I still love the teaching. I'd rather be in the classroom, don't get me wrong, but being exposed to that sort of thing will maybe open the possibility for you saying that if teaching is not the only thing I want to do, maybe I want to be an admin of some kind. There's definitely a lot of need for that too. And it could be your window into that opportunity. So another part. The other thing that I recommend along with that one is get involved in the school culture in any way whatsoever. Be helpful to organizations like ASB or Link Crew. These are like student activists, student active groups that are all about trying to build kids' relationship to one another and stress inclusivity and the idea that, you're part of a community as opposed to just you're coming there to punch in and punch out, which is, if you can have that, I understand the desire to do that. But if you really want to immerse yourself in the idea of being part of more than the kids' history class, then you should try your best to help other teachers to build clubs and other things like that too, to help see that you're part of it all together, right? This is a new one that I've added to the list because I don't think I've ever said this before, but if you get a chance to be a DCT, a district coordinating teacher, do it. I can't tell you how great it's been an experience having 2 people now work with me. It teaches me to be a better teacher. It constantly makes me reflect on some of the basics that we learned when we were in the credential program, things like when they talk to us constantly about pedagogy, like that word gets repeated so often that you're just but when you can remember that that's important and why you learn that, it's the student teacher that brings it out in you. So it's important is what I'm saying. So if you can have the opportunity to teach somebody else, what a great way to also, become a better teacher yourself too. And then finally, and this is really, really important too, I can't stress this enough because we've been living this for a year and it's hard to believe that, a year ago we had just been told okay, you're going to go away. We'll see how long it is. And then you're going to come back because my district is most likely going to be opening up on March 29th for secondary education. We're going to go back to the classroom modified. Pace yourself, for goodness sake, from a very early time. If you can learn to strike balance between your work life and your personal life, it will save you, lots of problems in terms of health and also fatigue, because one of the things that I've been tracking as closely as I can this year has been the number of teachers that have been quitting the profession, sadly. And I've just come across this article just a little while ago. I'll share it in the chat in just a second, but more and more teachers are quitting now, especially in this environment. And it might seem discouraging to some degree, but when you listen to the reasons as to what it is and what's going on, you'll find out that really what has happened with COVID recently has just been kind of like the breaking of the what's already been hurting for a lot of us already. But I think that if you learn from these experiences of other teachers and why some of them chose to leave and why some of them have chosen to stay too, it could help you assess, what you're also getting into. And I cannot encourage enough of you to please join the fold, come with us and help us become teachers because we need you. And I think that as more and more people might be leaving the profession, people, we still need good teachers out there to do this job, and it's still fulfilling in so many ways. I mean, even after a year, myself going through all this virtually, I still wouldn't quit it for the world. I love doing what I'm doing, and it's really the kids that keep me going. It's things like helping another teacher that keeps me going. Coming to these things is what keeps me going. You have to start building that foundation early on in order for you to make it through this, because it certainly is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And so pace yourself and find a way to build that foundation for yourself, whether it's with other teachers, networks like this one, take on someone to teach, and immerse yourself in the culture so that you feel you got more that you're fighting for than just a paycheck, which is, by the way, if you're into this for that reason, I mean, that's great. I respect that. But, you're doing this because you love it, and you'll build that love as you go along more and more. So sorry, I went a little longer, but that's kind of what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexander. Yeah, Michelle, go ahead, please.
So I'm going to approach it from a different angle because I don't have that secondary level teaching experience. I did teaching track when I was an undergrad and wanted to be a high school, junior high teacher, but I wasn't completely sure. And at that point, there wasn't any courses that I was aware of that I could take to get me that early exposure to teaching that would have like gotten my feet wet a little bit and made me feel comfortable moving into a credential program. I really felt like it was just a big jump. So instead I went to grad school for history and got my PhD. And if there are any of you who are considering that, maybe the divide of either going to grad school, doing a master's or PhD program, or going to a credential program, I would say in hindsight, I think that it would have served me better to maybe go to a credential program first and get some of those teaching skills so that, I don't know, maybe I would have felt more prepared in my early years teaching at the university level, but maybe not. Maybe that's just part of the process of learning how to teach. Is it something that you have to do by doing it, no matter the level? Something though that I've also discovered over the last few years, especially working with many K-12 teachers, is that the experience that I have in the classroom is very similar to the kinds of trainings over time that teachers received through their training and through credentialing programs. So interacting with students, understanding how to deal with people from all kinds of backgrounds and who bring just a variety of experiences with them into the classroom, building connections between yourself and your students to build that trust that Alex was talking about. There's so much of it that crosses from primary or secondary into higher education. And so there are a lot of similarities that we can see between the ways that we would teach at secondary levels or at university levels. So so if any of you are trying to make a decision, do you want to go into a credential program or move into grad school? I think that's something that would be a great conversation that we could have further outside of this. But my 2 cents is I would suggest maybe trying a credential program first, so then you can get that solid understanding. Maybe Michael might have some different insight because he did do that. So it might be interesting to hear. But that's it for me.
Thanks, Michelle. Let's go through Robert, James, Peg, and Jim, and if Tiffany wants to add anything, just to and then circle back. We do have until really 11:45 if we want to go. So there should be plenty of time to continue and hear from everybody. But Robert, and then James, Peg, and Jim.
Yeah, and the points I heard definitely from more of the classroom angle, really good stuff. One of the things I learned real early, and I don't remember who mentioned it, that the job pool is very slim when you get into history. And I remember someone telling me history teachers die at their desk, and but it's hard, but keep at it. Because I went on a lot of initial interviews, and it's don't be discouraged. It's sort of like the other disciplines. There's maybe more job openings, whatever, but stick to it. Don't get discouraged. And then I thought, since I loved history and I was good at it, that the kids would automatically love history. And I learned that very quickly. That doesn't happen right away. And I don't remember who said it, but building relationship with kids, I'll tell you as a principal, when I do interviews, that is what I'm looking for. Can I see a love of kids in the applicant? Because if you can get the kids engaged, and the kids can tell the difference between authenticity and someone that's just, up there, sage on the stage or whatever. Kids can tell the difference. And when I'm interviewing applicants, that is what I'm looking for, is does this applicant love kids? And the kids will tell the difference, and then that content will start coming, and kids will start eating it up, and kids will start doing things that you will blow your mind as to where you could take them intellectually, which is what's fun. And I think the first couple years of teaching, like you're drowning a little bit, you're like a day or two ahead of the kids. You don't know where the copy machine is. You don't know who to ask. You're just all over the place. And in that process, I think, and I've observed so many classrooms, and there's so many different styles of teaching that work, and finding your voice and finding your style is so crucial those first few years. And even as if you want to get into admin, it's kind of, what's your style? What kind of leader do you want to be? It's all connected. You really got to figure out how, because again, kids can tell the difference. Authenticity, it goes so far. What else? Oh yeah. When you're a teacher, if you notice you're irritable in October and April, that's normal. There's a long stretch where there's no breaks. And I also heard the marathon, a school year is a marathon, and learning the seasons of a school year and being able to adjust your momentum, and when do you kind of slow down, speed up? When are you recognizing your patience is slim? Maybe you're sending kids to the office for no reason. Whatever those things are, there are different points of the school year where that happens, and that's normal, and sort of getting used to that as you really develop as a professional, and being open-minded. History, again, kids, I remember I fell in love with history because it wasn't fact-based. It was discussions, it was writing, it was reading interesting articles, and that's what made history interesting. And I know that's what made it interesting in my class when I sort of took that approach versus remember that this happened on this date and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's what I got right now. Sorry, someone's calling me. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Robert. That's excellent. And I really like having, such a mixed perspective of teachers, students, administrators, faculty. Really great. James, and then Peg, and then Jim. James, do you want to give us some thoughts?
Yeah, perfect. So looking at this from a student-teacher perspective, I do want to talk about, of course, relationships with your cohort, your students. But probably the biggest thing I wish I had known last year, being an undergraduate student, was the costs that would come with being just a student teacher. Because it is important to keep in mind that you're working for free as a student teacher. This is unpaid, but the experience you're gaining is invaluable, is priceless. But you are doing a lot of stuff that is going to cost you a lot when you're working with state licenses, state exams. If you guys can get a CSET waiver, I'm telling you right now, that will probably be the biggest thing I am jealous of, that I should have pushed off graduation probably for another year and a half for. But the CSETs, you have to pay per test, and social studies is 3 different tests. So that's $300 for your CSET, $100 for your CBEST, your NTPA, which is this big portfolio that you put together during your student teaching of how you teach, how you work with different types of students. That's going to cost you another $300. It adds up very quick, and I wish I had known that these different things were there before I started, because I'm telling you all to have some type of savings account when you come into this, because I didn't have one, and I'm kind of figuring this out along the way, but they do add up quickly. So do that and have a savings account before you go into this. And I would say back to relationships, I think Hannah brought it up, have a good relationship with your cohort. One of my cohort members from UC Riverside is in the meeting too, Joshua, and he can tell you too, we always say amongst our cohort, we're a very close-knit group of like 12 people, and we always say we're the best cohort at UC Riverside because the support you get from that cohort really is unmatched. You're not going to get it anywhere else. Your supervisor is there for everything. The relationship you have with your DCT, you know, I don't know what type of lesson I want to do tomorrow. Your DCT is going to help you with that. I don't feel confident in how I'm teaching my students. Your supervisor can help you with that. If you just want to vent about one of your classes or how your day went, your cohort really is there for that. And that type of support you get from them as your friends and as this group of people who are going through what you're going through really is something you can't beat out of that program. And I think the last thing I would say is right now is application season for a lot of school districts. A lot of them are starting to open up their talent pools, their recruitment pools. And around January is when you really want to start putting yourself together and putting together your own portfolio of what you're going to apply with. And my DCT recommended that I would recommend to all of you is to put together a portfolio of what you can teach, different lessons you've created, maybe a recording of you teaching a lesson so that you can kind of, you know, sell yourself to that district and really know the districts that you're applying to. I've gone to a few job interviews and the first question I always get is, what do you know about our district? And you don't want to go into the interview and you're like, I know you're a school district. I know very little about your district. Know who you're applying to and know why you want to work there. Don't just go in there and say that you're looking for a job because you need one. But I think those are what I would touch on. Know the districts you're applying to. Have a savings account before you go into this because it is expensive. And have that relationship with your cohort because you can't get through your program without it.
Thank you, James. We'll go to Peg and then to Jim and Tiffany. Robert Clobes just sent me a note that he had to run. So I guess the principal is always busy, but he sends his regards and hopes to join us again in the future. Peg, please.
Hi, I have been really impressed in listening to you and the number of you who have talked about a network that you're part of and colleagues that you've nurtured. I want to warn you, however, that not all schools are set up to make that happen. In my experience in so many years working for the county schools it was 17 years doing that. And I spent lots of times in classrooms for various projects that I was doing. And you can tell a difference school to school to school. Some of them are very competitive with one another, the faculty. And so there's no sharing, there's no discussion, there's no support of the new teacher because the attitude is, I got mine and I worked at it. And now it's your turn to go through all the hoops. And there are lots of hoops. And the energy that you will need to be able to do what it takes to teach, which is a great deal of giving. You're having to get in the shoes of the kids and try to figure out what are these things that are, you know, what's behind what the acting out or the withdrawal or the failure to do any of the assignments or, you know, all of those kinds of things. And the kids will sometimes be people that you understand because the background is similar, but very often not like you were raised or because more than likely you were fairly academic. I was extremely nerdy, or actually was. I am extremely nerdy, still am, you know, and a lot of the kids are very physical and they're very into sports and all of that. I mean, and that's okay, you know, but when you're working with people, it's very important to have a cohort of people that you can ask things of and get new ideas from, because it's like parenting. You never know enough and you make mistakes and you will make mistakes. And you will be mad at yourself some days when you, and some days, I tell you, Friday is a much longer week than other weeks, you know. And that's why developing a professional cohort, and we've heard the different kinds of them being mentioned, it's so important. And I'm spending the last part of my career working with the Council for Social Studies, because that is a cohort of people that really enjoy social studies, or one of it's sometimes economics. Heavens, purgatory. Jim Charkins is part of the social studies program because he gets such a kick out of it, and he's taught econ at Cal State for 40 years or something like that, you know, and just loves working with teachers. And that's the kind of group that it involves. Michelle has done that more at the state level, but and with the History Project, that's a cohort if you want to get engaged there. But the point is, you need one of those. And as you mature in teaching, what happens is it gives you a chance to try out ideas and present for other teachers, which you can't really do in your own district very easily. You know, the idea that the wisdom is right among us, that's generally not acceptable in most places, especially in those schools where there's a lot of competition. And that is exacerbated when there's a testing program pushing it. And right now we're lucky because that testing has been pulled from us for a while, but it's going to come back, it appears, when I'm reading. So that would be my wisdom for you. And what I didn't know when I walked in the door, and I was the first female history teacher in the Chaffee district, which now has, is it 9 schools or 10 schools? And that shows you some of what you can imagine I was dealing with. Okay. I'm not sure the guys would know, but Michelle probably gets it. You know, so I did learn to make the coffee every morning, and that was the way I was able to at least stay on on a good morning category with the guys that were, and all of my fellow teachers were coaches. And so I was the only one that ever had time to go to a meeting. So those are my 2 roles that I played for many, many years. So those are the things, those are what schools are like, any kind of group. And the more you know how to grow and get the support you need, if your school is not doing it, the kids are still important. And so if you can get the support from other places, and we'd be glad to work with you in any way possible with the Social Studies Council. Inland Empire Council for Social Studies is what we are. So
Thank you, Peg. And a quick note, applause from Alexander for being an inspiration. And indeed, I second that. It's always such a delight to have Peg and Jim join us. And then Mark Groen's counterpoint, because my brother-in-law's started as a kindergarten teacher, the guys who become elementary teachers and are all approached as assuming that they're not teachers when they're met in the halls by parents. Absolutely. Thanks to Hannah and James and everybody for answering some students' questions in the chat. So if you don't have that chat window up and you have some questions, go ahead and open that up and see that there are some nice questions and responses. And I've posted 2 recordings of past future history teacher information. And I'm aware of the sci-fi implications of that, by the way. Only future history teachers of future history. That it's a whole genre, future history, which is pretty cool, and we can go down that road if you want to. But I'm going to turn it over to Jim Hill, please.
Okay. What I would like to add is from the point of view of school administrators, and in that regard, in my 10 years at Cal State in the Ed-Admin program, I visited zillions of schools in Riverside, San Bernardino, and sometimes LA County, down to Imperial County. And so I saw lots of people in lots of situations. And here's a couple of points. Number one, most school administrators in a hiring position are not that interested in your content knowledge. As you heard earlier, they are interested in your enthusiasm, in your energy, in your ways of connecting with kids, as Peg was talking about in part. So what you need to be alert to when you put together your resume is that your resume needs to radiate the ways that you are involved, the ways that you have teaching experience, the ways that you have engaged with people. Secondly, I would point out that most of the time, hiring happens by people knowing people or having been in situations where they've seen you one way or another. Substitute teaching is a phenomenal way of getting yourself out there. When you are applying for jobs, you need to go physically to school sites. You need to go physically to district offices. See if you can talk yourself into being interviewed on the spot, meeting people, letting them see you, letting them know you. Every single job I got in all those years was a fluke kind of situation where I happened to be in a situation where somebody knew me, and in spite of that, they were willing to hire me or whatever. But that's the way it works more often than not. So you need to be able to show that. You need to be able to communicate that. When you get interviewed, especially for high school, as Peg was referencing, it's still true that most of the time for social studies teachers, people who can coach a sport get the nod much more than people who have academic background but no coaching experience. There are some other ways to radiate. However, you might be involved in History Day judging, History Day coaching, mock trial, some of those kinds of social studies competitive events that you can coach or that you have experience. You could volunteer to help judge some of those events. By the way, if you do that, let's say, and become a History Day judge at County History Day or a school district History Day event, that's another way to be meeting the people who work there and get known. And as they know you, then they will think of you when it's time to hire somebody. So I would point those things out in the midst of all the other comments. Yeah, History Day is great from Michelle Karp. That's exactly right. So there are other kinds of competitive events, engaged events that you can get into. That could include youth groups in religious organizations. I mean, any of those kinds of things that you can share. So I will end my commentary with that. Back to you, Jeremy. And it's really, really something I don't know of any other university that has put together a program like Jeremy has to try to communicate to the next generation the knowledges and skills and experiences they need to be able to move forward. So Jeremy, kudos to you, big time.
Well, Jim, my specialty is presumptuous imposition on expert friends. That's my specialty, and so I really I think I might be losing my internet, but if you can hear me, my only specialty is imposing on my friends, and I think I am frozen. But if you can still hear me, Tiffany, Professor Jones, Department Chair, did you have any thoughts to jump in with?
I'm really just here to observe, and I can't always make these, but when I do, I'm always comes out very inspired myself, which is always great. What I wanted to say, just from the department chair perspective, is one of the things that I think students need to recognize while you're thinking about this career is that anything that you get involved with at an early earlier rather than later. So all those activities that we offer at a department level, you want to get involved in. If there are ideas of things that you want to do, like tutoring in the high school, our history club used to do a lot of those things, get involved. And that makes my job as a professor a lot easier when I'm writing those letters of recommendation for when you apply to the credentialing program. I don't want to write about the courses you took because everybody's taken those courses. It makes my job a lot easier when I can write about what a strong student you are and all that extracurricular activities that will help me judge whether or not you're going to be a good teacher. And you should not go into the teaching profession if you don't love teaching. A lot of people think it's an easy job. It's not, as you can tell from everybody who's been saying these things. So I just wanted to say, like, even if you have ideas, come to us as professors and we can help implement them. If you wanting to do stuff as a, as a group or as the history club or anything like that, that's what we're here for. But also get involved in all those extracurricular activities that we have. And the fact that you're even here is a good start. So I just wanted to mention that from the department chair level.
Thanks, Tiffany. And I'll open it to any closing remarks. I also don't want to overly impose on everybody's time, although that is Jim, that really is my only contribution, is to be presumptuous and a little bit, let's say, a little bit presumptuous on behalf of my students. But I will note, and maybe Alex's point is to this as well, ask them, if 3 months is a lot, but if I get a couple of weeks, it's good in terms of asking for letters. But what I would say to everybody is, and this is to Tiffany's point as well, to make, it's not necessarily presumptuous to tell a letter writer what you'd like the letter writer to highlight. I get this very rarely, but I would strongly recommend it. That is to say, have a working CV. It doesn't have to be perfect at all times, ready to send off, but it should be ready to send off on about 15 minutes notice. That is, you sit down for 15 minutes, update it, and fire it off. Have a CV/resume ready at all times. And that's sort of the point of doing these events, is to get you thinking in terms of being a kind of professional already. Being ready, as Jim said, to show your face, being ready to, when this is going to be permitted, being ready at a moment's notice, being familiar with some basics of the interview process. And Jim and Robert and others have talked about this, the enthusiasm that you bring to it, not the content knowledge necessarily. Yes, the content knowledge, of course, and Mark flagged this early on. Yes, the content knowledge is going to thrill some of your students in a really, really exciting way. But as a friend of mine said, one of the wisest things I ever heard was, you never really know this stuff until you have to teach it. So if you go in thinking you need to have a lesson plan memorized, and there's a real brittleness to that. And you should go in with flexibility and loving the encounter with the students, rather than necessarily coming in, because the risk then also is that you're going to see this just one-way vector between you and the students, where you're just going to pour their brains full of knowledge. And that's, of course, you learn very quickly that's not what teaching is. But the enthusiasm that you bring to it is essential. Knowing where to find the answers is essential. That's a big part of the content knowledge, is if you don't have the answer, you can say, well, I'll get it, I can get it for you tomorrow. And we can talk more about, Louis XIV if you want to, but that is important. But thinking of yourself as a professional in the making is very important. Having that CV ready, keeping those kind of things organized, looking sharp, as everybody on this panel except for me is doing today, is important. Going in with professionalism into these kind of things, I think is very, very important. And often, as Robert and Jim and Peg and everybody have pointed out, that will often set you apart from your peers. Make sure you're thinking of yourself as a professional, keeping your CV relatively dust-free and ready to fire off at a moment's notice, showing your face. I also want to second Professor Jones's note about getting involved. And Andrew, thank you for joining us today and telling us a little bit about the History Club. Professor Karp, Michael Carp, and Professor Mark Robinson are the faculty advisors for the History Club Phi Alpha Theta. award-winning Phi Alpha Theta chapter. They always are recognized as the best chapter in the country, best chapter in the country. I'm going to say that again. These are superstars, and your GPA's got to be 3.0, I think, 3.5 for MA students, but 3.0 for 3.1 maybe for undergrads. Get familiar with the history department website. There's a lot of information there. If you have questions, go through to the history department website and then see if you still have some questions, because you're going to answer a lot of your questions there. I want to thank Mark Groen for joining us, always from the education perspective. Hannah and Alexander talked about their students, but my first couple of years at Cal State were made much more pleasant, much more exciting because of Hannah and Alexander. I remember distinctly Hannah, Alexander, and a few other students who I just said, this place is the best. This is the best. And it was students like them who made it such a wonderful place to come to work. So being in contact with former students, and more recently James, but James is a fresh memory. It's always great to see James. It's really, really exciting. And Jim and Peg Hill always bringing the fireworks. Thank you, Michelle and Michael. I appreciate you guys bringing your students as well, and Professor Jones bringing the gravity of the department, and making sure that we're all on point. And to that department point, do please bookmark the history department website, because a lot of your answers are going to be there in terms of what's coming up. I don't want to impose on everybody's time, but if anybody has any closing thoughts, I want to open it up to the group. Andrew, go ahead, please. Can you unmute, Andrew?
Yes.
Whoop, you muted again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say, from the students' perspective, thank you very much, Dr. Morty and all the other panelists and all the other students for coming. I just think it's amazing. I've been, I think this is my third or fourth Future Teacher History event, and I love this event. I know I'm only a student, but I just love it every semester, and I feel like it's just so useful, and I get so much more out of it every time I come, and it's just such an honor and a great privilege and pleasure, I think, that the university allows us to have this event, and I just love it, and I look forward to the next one. And remember, guys, if you're a student or just interested, maybe even a panelist, feel free to come to our history club meeting next week from Thursday. It's a great time, and you guys will love it, and thank you very much, and I hope you guys have a great day and a great week.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for joining and representing the club and Phi Alpha Theta. That means a lot. Does anybody have any other closing thoughts, or do we need to wrap up? All right. I won't keep everybody then, except to say thank you for the students for joining, but all the faculty, everybody for making time. I know these are crazy, bizarre times, and the days somehow find a way of filling up with jam-packed stuff. And so I really appreciate you guys taking time to join our students and to share your wisdom. It means a lot to me, and as Andrew says, it means a lot more to our students. So I'll continue, Jim, in my specialty of being slightly rude and presumptuous and asking everybody to stay way over time and share all of their wisdom with our students. That's my specialty. And thanks. It is, to Andrew's point, this is one of the highlights of my semester. Really, always catching up with you guys. It's a lot of fun, and look forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thanks,
Thanks, Jeremy. That was awesome.
Thanks a lot, Michelle. And thanks for